Hi, Russ. He's got a cup of coffee because it's 7:50 in the morning, and Russ is a happy new father,
That's
so
right.
he's a bit tired.
Just a little bit. He, 3 weeks in, and he's sleeping mostly through the night, but not fully. So,
Yeah, but
yeah,
you've got those rosy red cheeks of a proud dad.
totally am a proud dad. Yeah, he's
Absolutely
amazing.
like
Yeah.
wonderful. You get the song. A quick hello, and we're good to go. Welcome to the show, Russ Jeffery. Rhymes with referee. Just thought of that. Yeah, because I misspelled your name. I thought it was Jeffrey Rey, but it's Ery, and it's actually quite a common name.
I think so. Yeah. I always get it that my last name is my first name, so I don't really know how to take the different spellings of Jeffrey. I'm just used to people calling me Jeff.
Right, okay. Russ Jeff. Lovely name. I'll call you Russ Jeff from now on. Right, as always, we start with brand search. So if we show that first screen, I actually looked your name up, and you've been infected with the Jason Barnard Kalicube Tuesdays. Oh no, we're not talking about that first. We're talking about the blue dog and the yellow koala. Just quickly about my experiment. I'm running an experiment on the blue dog and yellow koala families, and I'm trying to build the family tree, very appropriate for somebody who's just had a son, into Google's brain. And we've got the happy yellow koala family who are now united together in people also search for. And the blue dog family is coming along nicely, and we'll soon have them all united in a big long line. So that's part of the Kalicube experiment. And now on to Russ, who has been infected in the next screen with the Jason Barnard Kalicube SERP experiments. There you go. I pop up when you search your name, both as an image and with my name, I'm afraid. And if we got the next screen, if you look just in videos, it's even more scary. Oh no.
Dang.
Yeah, it's all Core Web Vitals. You and I only ever talk about Core Web Vitals.
I'll be honest, it's all I know about.
Oh, right. Okay, brilliant. Well, that's lucky, because if we get on with the show, that's exactly what we're talking about. And you know so much about this that this could last hours and hours and hours. Now, quickly filling in for everybody else, as you could see on the previous screen, Russ and I actually did a webinar on Duda about 3 months ago about what was going to happen, what we thought would happen, and what might happen, and how this might pan out as Google added Core Web Vitals as part of the ranking algorithm. And today, Russ is coming back on my show to tell us what actually happened. What happened, Russ?
It seems like it was a lot to do about nothing, a little bit, for the whole rollout of Core Web Vitals. Obviously, we're still in the middle of it here. Google says they're going to finish rolling out at the end of the month. I think for all intents and purposes, anyone who's doing SEO knows that at this point, Core Web Vitals is just a key factor in what you take into account when you are building websites and optimizing sites today. From a ranking perspective, I don't think we're going to see a lot of real examples of this website won out over this, other website because of a Core Web Vitals, ranking issue. And I think in the bigger picture, it's not a huge ranking change. I think the bigger shift is actually just more the industry kind of changing how they think about speed and giving them the metrics and values and things to focus on when building and optimizing websites that they need to focus on going forward. And yeah.
Sorry. Well, I was going to interrupt there, and because you were saying need to focus on. I mean, we've tended to be obsessed by pure speed.
Right.
We want our Ferrari or our dragster racer, and we actually need to paint it and make it look pretty, so that when it is relatively fast, it feels fast. Oh, it needs to be red. That was what I was trying to get at. And the Core Web Vitals, what I like about it is Google saying, actually, we're going to look at perceived speed.
Right.
And perceived, or the user experience within that perceived speed. So what was it called? The primary image of primary element of page. What was that called?
Oh, LCP, largest contentful paint, which is the biggest item to load on the page, right?
And basically they're saying we need to see something big and impressive fast.
Exactly. Yeah, like Google wants it to be under 2.5 seconds. And that's what they would call is a good speed to have the largest piece of content, right? And if you think about that from a person perspective, this is perceived performance, like just like you're saying, where people lose interest after 1, 2, 3 seconds of really not focusing or not seeing anything happen. And so Google is just looking to, great, how quickly can we get that information and get that content in front of someone and have them start consuming it?
Yeah, because I remember back in the day when it was maybe 10 years ago now, they had an experiment. I can't remember what it was called, but they showed you 2 sites and you had to click on the one you thought looked fastest. And I spent hours, days playing with it because I thought it was such a lot of fun. But it was an interesting experience for me, at least, because I then saw that what I perceived to be fast was actually just seeing something that I found interesting, a bit like an idiot cat or a stupid goldfish.
Right. Well, you're absolutely right that today one of the technical recommendations that's made really frequently is just this concept of lazy loading or delayed loading or optimizing for above the fold. All of this is that same process of just saying, hey, let's try and prioritize the loading of everything at the top of the page, what's going to be seen first, and let's move everything and load everything later. So the most common kind of optimization performance techniques are just move it, like load it later and delay it and just focus on that perceived experience. Even if the entire page takes 10 seconds, that 2 seconds at the beginning is the most important. Yeah.
Brilliant. Yeah, but which actually brings us to the next point, which is if you do that, you run the risk of having things moving around on the page as they load, which is content layout shift.
CLS, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and that's what I don't understand is, as a user, I find that phenomenally annoying. And as a website developer, I have left that shame be to me and just thought it doesn't really matter.
It's incredibly annoying. I feel the same way, where I read, I'm a political junkie and I read a lot of political articles, and a lot of them can be pretty long, and you get halfway through and something loads on the page and it shifts the spot that you're reading. And it's a freaking pain. You lose your focus. You lose where you were. It's a terrible, terrible experience. Google, is also trying to optimize for this. This is also one of the hardest ones to optimize for, just because it kind of goes against the way browsers work today. Browsers allow you, from a developer perspective, to add things into the page, to change the elements, to update what's going on there. And without, really changing the way you load things and being conscious of CLS, you're going to cause those layout shifts if you change anything on the page after it loads initially. And so it's one of the more hard ones to actually optimize for. And I think this is the one that caught most developers off guard, is the CLS, because in the past versions of Google speed tests, they didn't rank it very highly in importance. In past versions of Lighthouse, it was only 5% of the total weight. Now in Core Web Vitals, it's 1/3. And it was really, really difficult for people to recognize the importance of it. Yeah.
But that brings me to a question: was it only 5% because they didn't feel they could measure it accurately and therefore didn't want to scare people, or because they were just not considering it to be particularly important at the time?
No, they've had the CLS metric around for a few years now.
Really?
And so they've been able to measure it fairly accurately for a little bit. I think, Google selected it as a core web vital because they're trying to encompass the whole experience. A lot of the other metrics that Google has in their Lighthouse test, Lighthouse is their technical like lab tests that they do. A lot of the other metrics there are really on that first time performance, where one, it's like they have FCP, which is first contentful paint. We talked about largest. And so the first content is also something that they measure as well. They also look at this thing called speed index.
So just to come back to FCP and LCP, I mean, I like the idea because I thought, first contentful paint, I've got something in front of the user, that's good enough. But in fact, they're now saying, you don't just need the little menu at the top. You actually need something entertaining. So we come back to the stupid cat and idiotic fish again.
Yeah, exactly. And if Google didn't include FCP, they could, in future iterations of Core Web Vitals, they could include FCP if they want. If they did, they would have a lower threshold for it, though, right? A 2-second threshold or a 1.5-second threshold on that as a good experience for actually rendering and displaying content. They excluded it because they're trying to encompass the whole experience as part of the page metrics.
Right. And what's the next bit? You were talking about something. I interrupted you. You were moving on to.
Oh, all I was saying is a lot of the other metrics in the Lighthouse tests that Google provides, they're mostly focused on that first experience of the content first loading. So they have things like FCP. I was mentioning speed index a second ago, where speed index is just visually how quickly does the page load, is what that's looking at. They also have the other one that's kind of important is the FID, or sometimes it's called TBT, which is FID is first input delay. It's how quickly when I tap on the page and try and scroll, does something actually happen? And so if you tap and nothing happens, that's a poor experience. They're trying to measure that. So that's the first experience, though. It's FID. It's the first input. So they're trying to encompass more of that full page experience in the overall metrics, which is why I think Google really highlighted CLS as one of the key metrics now versus in the past they didn't.
But I just thought of something, which is why I keep going ooh. It's you've got this idea of impress me, largest contentful paint, then don't annoy me, content layer shift and FID. And basically that's the point. And you were saying you read a lot of political stuff. I mean, I read The Guardian because I'm terribly posh and from England. And they have a thing with the ads is that they shift and they do exactly what you're saying. And part of that from The Guardian is to get me to click on the ads without meaning to, or to make me aware of the ads where I was actually just reading the article. And maybe Google are trying to kind of encourage sites to do less of that because it is phenomenally annoying.
Absolutely. I think in Google's interest, they know that when the end result page has a better experience, they're more likely to go back to Google and find that page in the first place. So really, Google is just trying to extend the entire experience of the web and make it an entirely better across the board. If they know that a page shifts and is moving around and causes a poor experience, that means a user might bounce. They might not come back to Google, and maybe they'll go directly to the app instead of using Google search to find that type of thing in the future. Whatever it might be, Google's really trying to prevent that and just keep people coming back to Google in the first place.
Yeah, I think kind of people often forget that. I mean, Google's got such domination in most markets that they forget that Google can actually lose. I mean, Bing could take some of the market share back. And the other thing that people forget is Google are piggybacking off the quality of our content to make themselves look good because they're recommending the best content. And so if you kind of look at it from that perspective, if you're saying Google are piggybacking off my great content, I need to make great content that fits with what they want their users to get, which is the fastest solution. And as users, we use Google and we want that. As marketers, we would like Google to forget that and just rank us.
I mean, you're absolutely right with your analysis here. I think, I think Google does see competition in some places in the market, right? Obviously they have 91% of all searches today, but if you look at certain sectors and things like, product searches or purchase searches, right? Amazon absolutely competes with them on search first. If YouTube were outside of Google, YouTube would compete with them on video searches as part of the overall search industry, or online like hotel and booking reservations, right? They absolutely have competition from Expedia, from Booking.com. They do have competition, and they're trying to ward off all of those different locations. And so Core Web Vitals is just their effort to continue to promote and make sure that organic results are as relevant as possible across the board, and also really try and make sure that every time somebody comes to Google search, they're getting a top-notch experience all the way through that click chain.
But sorry, you just made a really interesting point that's got nothing to do with Core Web Vitals. Nothing. But it is that as well, that Google do see the competition from, if we don't give a good experience and provide the videos when people are looking for videos, they might just go straight to YouTube, despite the fact YouTube is them. But they might also go for news directly to news sites, or for shopping, go to Amazon directly. So they are fighting more battles than just Bing, which we tend to assume is the only battle they're fighting in search.
Yep. Yeah, you're absolutely.
No, but you were right, not me. You said it.
Well, I'm right about you being right. Yeah.
Yeah. This could go on forever. Yeah, I'm right about you being right about me being right. Oh, cool. Anyway, sorry, back to Core Web Vitals, because I really like the idea that Google are pushing us, or they're encouraging us with the carrot and stick thing to improve our users' web experience. And that's a good thing for us at the end of the day. And from that perspective, have you seen a lot of sites actually act and react to this, or have you seen a lot of people falling by the wayside?
I can only really speak to my experience at Duda as part of this. So what we've seen is we obviously saw a big increase in our customers asking us about core web vitals and trying to optimize their sites for it. And so at Duda, since we control a lot of the technology decisions that go into it, about 50% of what the customers can do is on their own, and it's just in terms of let's optimize the way the site is built. Let's remove heavy media from the top of the page. Let's get rid of that background video that you may not need. Let's move that big heavy Facebook comment section down to the bottom of the page. It's those type of things that we give our customers on. Then the other 50% is really from the technical side of what Duda can do to improve all of our sites across the board. And really optimize for that. And so we give a lot of guidance to our customers about how you can build, and within the Duda system, you can build a fast site and recommend like how you do that. And those follow obviously what Core Web Vitals is and optimizes for those three key metrics. But it's a little more complicated for Duda than it is, I think, for other systems where if you're using a WordPress, you have full control over the entire end-to-end ecosystem, right? Yeah.
Well, sorry, just a quick hello to everybody who's saying hello. It's not that we're ignoring you. We're just getting into our conversation here. One thing that did strike me is that, Duda control a great deal of the flow and the loading. Yeah. Do you find that people ruin it for themselves by trying to put too many bells and whistles and trying to be too clever or too impressive?
Yes. Yeah. All the time. And I think it makes sense, right? People want to have pages that are really rich visually or rich, full with background videos and a lot of videos, or big image galleries with lots of images. People want to do these things, and it actually might make sense from a user experience and a design perspective to make those decisions in terms of, great, I'm going to have an image gallery, and that image gallery is going to have 50 images as part of it. And that's going to be a really big page, and that's going to score poorly on Core Web Vitals when you do that type of thing. And so on the Duda side, obviously this is an education where we're trying to educate our customers about, great. So, it probably makes sense from a design perspective, but maybe you want to split this up or make this over multiple pages, or how can you do this in a way that might make more sense from a speed or performance perspective? Because there is a trade-off there from a design versus functionality perspective. And we definitely see that difficulty, because the speed and Core Web Vitals is not it's not easy, and it's definitely not top of mind a lot of times when people are building a site, when it's already hard enough to build. We see it's already hard enough to build a website as it is, to get that right content, to find the right visual imagery, to do all the things, all the creative side of actually building a site is already hard enough that a lot of folks don't have the the kind of the next the mental capacity in that process to also include speed as part of that thought process.
Right. And and also kind of, with companies, you have the boss breathing over your shoulder saying, I want this to look pixel perfect. And you say, well, there's always a trade-off, and you need to find it. And I don't like to use the word compromise, but it's a balance between that pixel perfect thing you want, those bells and whistles you want, that in-your-face impressive gallery with the full screen video that you want, and the fact that you're just not going to perform for your users or for Google.
You're absolutely right. And a lot of times performance, comes down to being one of those trade-offs that you need to make in that process. And I think, this is one of the things I think has really changed in the industry that, I brought up a little earlier is now you're going to see marketers, you're going to see SEOs, you're going to start to see some developers talk about this more upfront and talk about the impact of saying, okay, great, we want to do this fancy thing on the website. It's going to have these other trade-offs that we're going to need to make, and we're going to need to kind of either deal with or incorporate in or do more work to solve that problem. as part of the effort. And I think, to Google's credit, Core Web Vitals has really elevated that and just kind of made it a little bit more prominent and made that part of the conversation as part of building a site and optimizing for it.
Yeah, I mean, Google do that a lot. I mean, they try to drive the conversation towards mobile friendliness, towards HTTPS, and at the end of the day, those mobile friendly and HTTPS, did they really have an effect on rankings? HTTPS certainly not. The mobile was so gradual and so pushed back all the time. You don't really know when it did kick in, so you don't know when it might or might not have an effect. But with Core Web Vitals, have you seen any changes in rankings or performances?
We have not seen any real ranking changes. At Duda, we track the average number of sessions that come from Google per website. So
hang on, you said you've got hundreds of thousands of websites. Is that right?
Yeah.
Somebody commented, hundreds of thousands? That's a lot.
It is a lot. We're hosting quite a few websites today. Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead. So you track average session length?
Yeah. So two key metrics that we look at is one is average sessions, from Google specifically, and then also just the percent of traffic that we see from organic search as a whole. And we haven't seen that change over the past month and a half, since Google really started rolling this out in July. And I really don't think we will, because the reality is that this is a fairly small signal for them, and all the other things that go into it of having the right content, focusing on the right keywords, all of that is still going to be more important than Core Web Vitals as a whole. So
and I mean, kind of often we talk about hundreds of thousands. It's a lot, says Hans Knapp. When you talk about things like, I mean, HTTPS is a great example. Gary Illyes has been saying, "Oh, that's a tiebreaker at best," and Core Web Vitals, they're saying, well, that's probably a tiebreaker as well. But then he also said in Search Off the Record, the circumstances where two results put in an equal bid is next to never.
Yeah.
So in fact, the tiebreaker never comes into play. So in fact, does it even affect in any way, manner, or form? If it's just a tiebreaker and they never have the same scores, it therefore never comes into play and therefore has no effect at all. What do you think of that? New theory.
Well, I think one is I think that's correct. I think speed is probably a little bit higher of a ranking factor than HTTPS would be my guess. And if I were to make a prediction, I would think Google is actually going to increase the relevance of speed going forward. Right now, it's not a big ranking factor, but I think they will. I think they'll find that sites that score better have a better engagement factor. I think their numbers will kind of prove this out over time. And now that Google has this data and is actually actively including it in SERPs, they'll be able to incorporate that back in more. So I think what we'll see is, one, they're going to evolve Core Web Vitals and either change the metrics or add new metrics into Core Web Vitals. And then two, that they'll increase the weighting of it. It's never going to be, as relevant as backlinks, as relevant as content, as relevant as, many of the other aspects that go into it. But that would be my prediction that it will, over the next 2, 3, 4 years, become more relevant. Yeah.
Brilliant. Oh, I love this. Now, you're up for predictions. That's good news. Yeah. Do you think they're going to put a little icon in the results that says this is Core Web Vital friendly?
I really hope they do. I want them to. I don't think they will.
Hang on, sorry. You hope they will because Duda's always going to win.
Yeah, of course. It's good. That's a selfish reason for Duda. We know that most websites today don't pass Core Web Vitals, right? It's something like 30% of sites pass all three metrics. Duda's doing a better than industry average on that. So obviously that's a benefit for Duda. But I don't know I don't think they will do the icon. I think they're going to test it, but it doesn't seem like, I think they would have rolled it out already. They've already been testing it, and they would have had a clear indicator of no go a while ago. So I just think they're not going to do it. Yeah.
No, it's a great answer. The other thing, I mean, having asked that silly question, but I love that. I hope they do. Is that when somebody sees the icon, they click on the website, they wouldn't actually feel or perceive any kind of difference necessarily. So the icon would then have no sense. Whereas the AMP one, you've actually got the very boring AMP layout that people get, but the incredibly fast performance where you think, yes, I get some feedback immediately as a user from that icon. Whereas with Core Web Vitals, there would be no immediate feedback.
Yeah, exactly. And how does Google associate it? And the reality is that, with AMP they kind of knew, and AMP they could do like the preloading, so it was nearly instant.
Yeah.
With Core Web Vitals, you don't get that same instant experience because the content's still going to be on the end domain. You still have to go through a lot of that. You're still going to get a period of white screen as you're making that transition from Google to the next website. And so I don't think they can kind of rely on it the same way they relied on it with AMP, just because from a technical performance perspective, it's never going to be the same. So
yeah, I mean, you're never going to get rid of that short period of white screen, and you need to get the largest Contentful Paint to get the attention back. Because one thing that strikes me about it is, we're very impatient, but I mean, even if it's almost immediate, when you're moving from one environment, which is the Google SERP, onto a website, there's a change in perspective in your brain. And I think a lot of us half forget what it is we were looking for. And we need reminding, and we need reminding quickly.
I agree from the user perspective that, they're leaving the environment and they're leaving the Google ecosystem. What's an icon going to do to change that perception? Not much. Yeah.
No, sure, 100%. Yeah. And from a developer perspective, I mean, this is leading them on to another kind of slightly related problem question that isn't really Core Web Vitals. Is, do you not find that a lot of people like ourselves are sitting in offices with very fast connections, and we totally forget that Google's actually judging all this on the equivalent of a 3G connection, because there's a vast number of people with very bad connections?
Yeah, well, I think that's definitely true. Most people just will go to a site. You brought up the example of your boss wanting a pixel perfect site, and they're going to have a great experience because they're either going to be on their corporate network with their desktop computer, and it's going to load instantly, and they don't see that slow speed. Or even if they do load it on their phone, they're loading it on the latest iPhone, probably on Wi-Fi. Probably it happens quickly still when Google is recognizing that a lot of people around the world are still on slower connections, and a lot of the testing tools that are used still use, like you're saying, use the old kind of 3G, what they call as a fast 3G connection on the phones themselves as the connection speed. Actually, one interesting thing from my experience from the Duda side is we see that the Lighthouse test, which is the lab test that tests in 3G, is actually too restrictive. And the reality is that performance, at least in most Western countries, is quite a bit better than that 3G experience. So even if you filter just for mobile devices, the average speed is quite a bit better than Lighthouse will show. So Duda has quite a few examples of sites that pass Core Web Vitals, but on the Lighthouse test, they're getting in the 60s or sometimes into the high 50s on the Lighthouse test when you're running it over and over and over again.
All right, we've just been shown a really colorful graph with the different Core Web Vitals technology report, with WordPress doing slightly better, but Joomla doing reasonably a lot better. Hang on, we're going to look for... Oh, Duda's the incredibly impressive green line, of course. Yeah. Of course it is. Anton is now totally biased, and that's delightful.
Totally. So that's what I was referencing a little bit earlier from a technology perspective, where Duda does, a little bit better than most of the industry.
Right, but I mean, what we were seeing there as well is that up until May, June, everybody was on kind of flatlining, and then it all suddenly went up because all of these different platforms made efforts. And I run a couple of WordPress sites, and they all updated with lots of super duper funky new stuff, including what's it called, Gutenberg in the widgets in the footer, which is delightful. I had a great fun playing with that the other day. but the WordPress core updates have actually dealt with that quite a lot as well.
Yeah, definitely. Obviously, everyone's recognizing the importance and recognizing that the CMSs of the world are responsible for at least part of this, not all of it, but at least part of these optimizations can be done. With WordPress, I think they've done a good job of really trying to improve the core of WordPress, but it's going to be difficult because they have the theme system. Themes have their own set of code bases and their own logic built into them, and then obviously the plugins as well. All of those really need to be optimized and built with Core Web Vitals in mind as part of that process too.
Right. Yeah. I mean, sorry to come back to WordPress. I mean, because it is a big part of the internet today.
Absolutely.
And I hate themes. I mean, obviously, I'm totally biased and lazy and boring. But the thing with themes is, as soon as you install a theme, you add a layer of complexity and a layer of danger. And so I now just tell people, everybody, bite the bullet, accept the design isn't going to be pixel perfect. Use a core WordPress theme. Adapt that using the CSS. Use Gutenberg. If you need something spectacularly sexy, then use a Gutenberg block. But nobody ever listens to me. All my clients just go ahead and install Elementor or what was it, FlexGrid. I hate FlexGrid. Sorry, FlexGrid, if you're out
there. There's some solid page builders out there, like you're saying. Elementor is one of them that allow you to kind of design and build. But you're right. Like these themes, a lot of them haven't taken Core Web Vitals into account, or let alone other aspects like security and accessibility as part of them. And it's kind of difficult.
We just had on screen, for the people who can't see the video, I hate themes, quote by Jason Barnard. It's now official.
I'm gonna, one thing, I attended recently the Shopify developer conference that they had. And Shopify introduced a brand new theme. I don't remember what they call it, but it was all focused on performance. And it, like, out of the box, it got, great performance speeds. And that was their recommendation that all developers build on top of, is start with this new, fresh kind of clean slate. And this follows a lot of those best practices and does well on Core Web Vitals. And so, obviously you see all of the CMSs in the industry kind of responding to this as a whole, just like you're saying. WordPress had some updates, Shopify have updates. Wix and Squarespace are addressing it in their own ways, slowly as they move forward too. So,
No, that's really good news. I really like the idea of saying to people, here's a really simple, fast, efficient, effective theme. Start with that and build on it little by little, and don't add too much, and don't do things that are going to slow it down. Don't do things that will break it on updates. And it's one of these terribly difficult things for people to do, especially the boss who wants his or her pixel perfect website. Deeply frustrating. But starting with that simple idea and building on it and avoiding the temptation just to add bells and whistles is a great way forward. Sorry, I was going to make a point. I've just remembered what it was. It was that people say, but it will look like everybody else's site. And you just smiled, meaning no, you don't think that's true.
Doesn't have to. I mean, actually, I would argue the opposite, that themes make your site look like everyone else's site.
Ooh, that's a good quote as well. That's worse than I hate themes.
And themes are probably more restrictive in that sense of really having the flexibility and doing what you want. All I was going to say is this. I have 2 points to make. One is this is a trade-off of it's time and money versus actual performance that goes into it, because optimizing for performance and optimizing for unique design, or whatever you want to call it, it's a trade-off of spending more time and spending more resources on it, and a lot of people don't want to do that as a whole. I think also from the technical side, I think developers have a big problem to solve, where for a long time on the web it's been add this new piece of code, insert this extra JavaScript. This new thing will allow you to do that shiny new thing, like you're saying. And developers for a long time have not really looked at the performance implications of just including these extra pieces of code in their website and what that means from a performance perspective. It's become so easy and so convenient to just add in a new library or a new set of code to do something and to solve a problem. And developers have really taken that to whole, and only now is that really shifting from a mindset perspective in any type of web development that's going on, of the actual performance implications of just including something new in your project. And so I think the technical community is also has a big kind of blame in this, of making it so easy to include extra pieces of code and extra kind of snippets to do those fancy shiny things like you're saying.
And they have even faster connections than the boss.
Of course. Yeah.
So they see it even less than the boss does.
They do it all from their local machine. So they're not going to the internet to download things. They just download it from their local machine, and it's really fast. Yeah.
Oh, right. Yeah. Proper developers do it on the local machines.
Exactly.
I'm not one of those. Yeah. Brilliant. Wonderful stuff. Was that your 2 points, or did you have a second point to make? Right. Okay. Because you very pointedly said, I have 2 points here. And that was to make sure I didn't interrupt halfway through. And I do appreciate that. Yeah. No. Okay. I was going to go back to how do SEOs now, given all of that, manage to get the developers on board to actually make them start thinking about that?
Yeah, I think first and foremost is it's an education and it's a communication problem. So it's from as early on in the conversation as possible of building a website or optimizing a website, it's coming in and saying, hey, look, we think performance is important. Here are the tools we use to measure performance. Here are the metrics we're trying to hit. Here's what we see, and then diving into the actual data. I think a lot of SEOs lead with data, and then they'll lead with a checklist of things that need to be fixed. And I think that's probably the wrong approach. When you work with developers, you want to include them in what is that problem we're trying to solve, not the result of the problem. Let's actually get to the root of it, and let's have a conversation about prioritizing this from the beginning and making it part of the thought process. So, obviously if you're building a new site, trying to keep that into account and allowing developers to take that into account during the build process. If you're coming in after the fact, it's going to be a little bit of education and saying, great, we need to focus on speed because of X, Y, Z reasons. This is, we see that page performance is really low, and we want to improve it going forward across all pages of the site, not just, individual pages as a whole. So I think, kind of bringing them into the fold and really getting them on your side is going to be step number one. And then step number two is getting into the data. Yeah. Right.
Okay. And another question then is, how do I get the boss and the developer to talk to each other? Because the developer will say that's going to take 12 extra days of development, and it's going to cost you an absolute fortune because I won't be doing other things, and there are other priorities. How do you manage to get I'm saying boss, but the person who's actually managing the project to say to the developer, this is actually a priority over and above the other things that are going on?
That's a hard one. That's a really hard one.
But it does say at the bottom of the screen, Director of Strategic Integrations. And I thought the last answer just demonstrated why that's your job title. So I thought I'd ask you a doubly difficult question so you could really prove your worth.
Yeah, I think one is obviously like shared goals, right? What are those goals and what is focused on it? And, I think we talked about a little bit earlier that core web vitals and speed is not the number one factor in ranking. And so it might not be the most important thing for people to decide to prioritize. Now, it's probably going to have to say, okay, great. We know that your site is performing at X today. We see, these related metrics of bounces are really high. We're not ranking in X search results. And we think this is why, showing the data and trying to prove that, speed is the problem or performance and experience is the problem.
Right.
And trying to get that prioritized and included as part of the roadmap. I think what SEOs will often find is it's going to be a trade-off. It's going to be, great, let's tackle the 5 hairiest problems and let's get it down to a okay or a yellow score instead of a green score. And you're going to have to live with that and be okay with that. And you'll never be, fully in the green and fully passing web vitals.
Right.
But I think that's okay for the most part, as long as the experience is, mostly there. From an SEO perspective, you're still going to be able to do your job, and you're still going to be able to, drive the right keywords, rank for the right search results,
Brilliant.
Things like that. From an SEO's perspective, you're still going to be able to get there, even if you're not 100% perfect in the passing all core web vitals. Yeah.
Brilliant. Well, you've just nailed Director of Strategic Integrations as a job title. That's absolutely brilliant. Done. Thank you so much, Russ. That was amazing. So I'm just going to quickly announce next week. Next week, we've got Mark Beerlin talking about, if we can have the screen up, because it's local SEO, strategic versus tactical local SEO.
Yes.
And Mark is super smart, super fun, delightful, and he knows absolutely boatloads about local SEO. Cool. And that's going to be awesome. So please do come along. And one other quick announcement, which is the last one, is in an hour's time, Jerry White is going to be talking about something that I know nothing about, single page apps. And apparently single page apps are a thing. And secondly, you can do the SEO on those single page apps. So do trot along to that. It's in an hour's time. Thank you so much, Russ. You get the outro song. A quick goodbye to end the show. Thank you, Russ. Happy new father.
Awesome. Thank you, Jason. I appreciate the song. This is fun.
Brilliant. Thank you, Russ. That was